Episode 150, Danielle Gibson, jewelry designer, coach, and confrontation expert.
What started to happen is I started to hear the word confrontation come up a lot. And it would be like, I'm not good at confrontation, or I'm scared of confrontation.
I'm Mark Rabin. This is My Favorite Mistake. In this podcast, you'll hear business leaders and other really interesting people talking about their favorite mistakes. Because we all make mistakes, but what matters is learning from our mistakes instead of repeating them over and over again. So this is the place for honest reflection and conversation, personal growth, and professional success. Visit our website at myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. To learn more about our guest, look for links in the show notes, or you can go to markraven.com/mistake150. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you do, please rate and review the podcast. Please share a link to it on social media. Thanks again for listening. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Rabin, and our guest today is Danielle Gibson. She describes herself as a confrontation expert, and she's a certified performance coach. Her firm is Danielle Gibson Coaching and Consulting, and you can find her online. This is a great URL, the Confrontationalist.com. So there'll be a link to that in the show notes. Danielle was previously owner and designer at a jewelry company, Danielle Gibson Designs. She has a degree in fine arts, and I think this is interesting. Also studied the Italian language and literature in Italy. So Danielle, first off, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk about mistakes today. This will be fun.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that you and other guests think that it's fun, or at least it's engaging and it's good reflection. Before we get into that, I mean, I'm jealous. I've only spent a little bit of time in Italy. I'm guessing that was not a mistake to go. Well, how long did you live there?
So I studied there for a semester when I was in college. I was an art major, and it was the only country I could go to where I could get credits. And it terrified me because it required that I learn another language. But as it turns out, I really loved learning another language. So I was there for 6 months, and then I went back home. I finished school. I worked for about a year and a half, and then I moved back. Thinking it would be another 6 months to a year, and it turned into almost 2.5 years. So it was not at all a mistake.
Well, good. There's no shortage of art to study over there.
Well, it's also learning a different way of life that made me go, why is America supposed to be the best country in the world? I'd like to update that statement.
That's certainly, until you get exposure of visiting other cultures, it's a mistake to think whatever country you're born in, it's a mistake to think your country's way is the only way or the best way necessarily.
I know. And it's funny because I'm like, this must have been a slogan at some point that just never went away, like something after a war but every country thinks their country is the best. I mean, Italians, not only do they think their country is the best, but they think their region is the best. Yeah. It's crazy.
They're part of Italy, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each, and also if you're below Rome, that's like bad. If you're above, there are all these weird territory issues, and there are a lot of different regions, but that's what makes it such a great country for me as a tourist. Yeah. Maybe not for them. I don't know.
Yeah. But for a long time, it wasn't a unified country. So that history kind of continues itself in a way.
That's right.
All right. So welcome to Italy Talk. No, that's right. That would be a fun podcast. But back to my favorite mistake. Danielle, with the different things you've done in your career, thinking back, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
So it's more recent. It's a fairly recent. So I went to get certified for coaching, and it was an 8-month program. And so it was all new to me. And once you get through the program, and I'm not unique in this, there's this desire to go and do and without knowing almost anything. Like all it was learning a methodology. So I spoke to there are a lot of coaches who help coaches build their brand. And first and foremost, you shouldn't hire a coach to help you build your brand because they're a coach. They're not a branding expert. So there's that. And I mean, it works for some people. It didn't work for me. And so I was just done with my certification, and she was telling me how she worked, and I was so eager to get started that I chose to work with her, and it was a very costly investment. And we did it. I created a website and I branded myself. And then once I was done, I realized I created a brand for an audience that I couldn't find, that was a very specific audience. And then I spent a couple of months trying. And then I thought, okay, this isn't going to work. You can't just stay with it because you just spent a lot of money. You have to kind of eat it. And so I chose to scrap it and go and do something else. So it was a lesson to not choose to do something because I want to, because I was not informed enough to make the decision.
So before digging into the story there, so the Confrontationalist, that was your second attempt at branding. And did you generate that?
It's my third. It's actually
your third.
My third.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Third time's the charm.
Yes.
So tell us more about, I'm curious of those cycles and then how you found this term.
So when I was working for the man, I worked a lot with different agencies, branding, marketing, advertising agencies. And I thought they're a very toxic environment. I should approach them. And so my first niche was that I was approaching the agency world, and that didn't work. And then I kind of became vague, and I became like a business and life strategist because I was helpful in business, and I didn't want to be a life coach. And there's all of this stigma around the coaching industry. And then I just kind of helped people in various ways in life. I mean, the bottom line is if I work with you on your life, your business is going to get better, and vice versa. So I did that for a few years. And then what started to happen is I started to hear the word confrontation come up a lot. And it would be like, I'm not good at confrontation, or I'm scared of confrontation. And because I'm a fairly assertive person, and that was used, I'm not good or I'm scared of confrontation, was used in all of these different contexts, I started to kind of look at that and go, what are they talking about exactly? And what does it entail truly to be confrontational? And it's also, the word itself is seen negatively. People think it means conflict, when in fact, conflict is what generally arises when you don't confront something. So what I did is I looked at areas that required to be confrontation, and most of them are conversations. And all of them are it entails speaking. And then what happens when you're not confrontational? How does that affect you negatively? So I kind of did my own little research. And then I was like, okay, so what do I do with this? And because it's really hard to stand out in the coaching world, I thought it would be helpful to be provocative, and knowing that this word is scary to people. I created a word, the Confrontationalist. I can't tell you what it means. I guess I'm a confrontationalist, but I am a confrontation expert, and my URL is the Confrontationalist. So basically what happened is I hired someone again to help brand me. I figured out my definition of confrontation, which is to deal directly with something or someone you've been avoiding out of fear. And then I spent a lot of time talking about it. There's an app called Clubhouse that people go on, and I would talk about it, and I was able to learn how to actually talk well about this so that people understood what I meant, because I'm changing the definition as people know it.
Well, confrontationalist, while it takes a little practice to say smoothly, I mean, I think of, hospitalist, is a physician who works primarily in the hospital medicine. So I would say, or a conversationalist is somebody who's good, it sounds, at conversation, but someone could say they're a good conversationalist, right? So I think that's not a negative term, conversationalist, but there's usually a modifier.
Right.
You're right. I mean, I agree with you. To say someone's confrontational is probably almost always 99% of the time used as a criticism, unless maybe it's an attorney or somebody who you want to be, like, it makes you think of like aggressive, which is not exactly how you're defining it. Or, but you use the word assertive. How is confrontational different than assertive?
Right. So I can give you a few examples of what I help people with. So a lot of people have a really hard time being direct. And that's never been my problem. So for example, growing up, I would be in, workshops, or I'd be in class or something, and I'd ask questions. And at the end of the whatever it was, people would come over to me and thank me. And I'd be like, why are you thanking me? I just asked a question. And for years, I was like, what? Why aren't you asking the question? I don't understand. And so with the coaching I've been doing, I understand that the reason why a lot of people don't open their mouth when they have questions is because they literally say, I don't want to sound stupid. So I'm like, I'm a smart person. I say stupid things all the time. I don't have a problem with that. But to me, that means that that's a limiting belief that they have about themselves. So being assertive means speaking up. It means being that person who asks questions, being that person who might have an opinion that's contrary to others and offering it up, and not being concerned with the fact that someone might not like it. I mean, that's actually what you need to be. You can't be concerned with what someone else thinks if you want to be a true confrontationalist, because just their opinion, it's not anything more than that. So being assertive, it could mean being straightforward with a client. It could mean being straightforward with your boss. It could mean being straightforward with your parents. Like it's anything. So that's one thing.
Yeah. And then that just a thought on that real quick. Sorry to interrupt. It doesn't necessarily mean oppositional or combative. Nope. Like you could be assertive in a way that's not necessarily disagreeing, right?
It's almost never, it's asserting your opinion or your feeling. So for example, if we were having a conversation and you said something that felt bad, I felt bad as a result of that. And I would say, I just need to stop right now because something you just said, I got triggered and I don't want to hold on to it. So I'm just going to say something now. This is about me. It's just how it landed. It could be that. Or it could be in the workforce when a boss tells you to do something, but you have an idea of something that you think is more efficient. And then you could go, well, I was kind of thinking that maybe this would be a good approach. And that is really hard for people to do because for a number of reasons, because the boss might have an ego and he may not like it, or you are intimidated by that person because he's authority or she's authority, or you just don't have a very high opinion of yourself and your ideas. So it's almost never combative, ever. I mean, it could be perceived as combative by the other person, but that's not something you can control.
Yeah. Now, your comfort with confrontation or speaking up or assertiveness, like, do you think that comes from like upbringing, family environment where this was demonstrated to you or it was encouraged and welcome?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a house where you could pretty much say anything. And there was a lot of oversharing also. And it was very often without a filter. And so I saw that. And I didn't see it, by the way, in the most beautiful way. I mean, it was a fairly toxic environment. But, one of my parents was very, no filter, always, yelling and lots of talking and yelling. But the thing is that I was never told to not speak up.
Mhm.
So I learned it was safe to do that. Whereas I think a lot of people are told to be quiet or told not to speak.
Mhm.
So I do think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
So, looking back to your story, because I mean, there's a lot more I want to ask about being direct and constructive confrontation and what have you. But back to your story of hiring that coach. What were some of the lessons learned that you would apply now if you were looking to hire somebody to assist you, to be a partner, vendor, whatever term you might want to use to you and your
Yeah.
business?
So one of the things that is a really important lesson for everyone about everything, in my opinion, is to not make a decision when you're emotionally involved in it. So I had an idea of what I wanted my life to look like, and it was all just kind of fluffy, nothing linear. And she was going to provide me with the way to go, and so I was making up a story basically, and which is what a lot of people do. And so that is one of the biggest lessons, which is to never make a decision. Ideally, you're making a educated decision, but I didn't have enough information to be educated, but I didn't know that yet. So I would say that I learned that it's always really helpful to give yourself a beat before you do something. And I wrote a blog once that was called "What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do," and one of the things that I suggest is for you to wait until you do know what to do. But at that time, I was so eager without knowing that I was actually creating a business. The business is of coaching, but the structure is a business. And so it didn't occur to me to look around and talk to different coaches and be able to weigh, what feels right to me. It was almost like a knee jerk, um, as if she were the only person in the world
Mhm.
who does that.
Mhm.
Like the cut to now, everyone does it,
Mhm.
so
Sure.
it's always do your research is the lesson. Do your
Mhm.
research. Do not make emotional decisions when you're emotionally involved. Give yourself some time to think about it. It doesn't need to be right now.
Sure.
It doesn't need
Yeah.
to be in a month, but it could be in 3 days.
Yeah.
So those were two that were big
Yeah.
for me.
I mean, it seems like there's different aspects of the mistake that you've pointed to. Maybe the mistake of rushing into a decision, maybe the mistake of choosing somebody that wasn't really the right fit for what you were needing. Think of like writing a book. You wouldn't hire a cover designer to help with the proofreading of the inside of the book. It's different skill sets. You might need each of them
Right.
at a different time, but you could hire someone who's a bad fit. And then there's maybe another mistake of, I think maybe you've alluded to this, of not looking at alternatives. Do you fixate on the first person you find as opposed to maybe finding three? I mean, this is helpful if you're hiring a plumber or a
Absolutely.
life coach or an orthopedic surgeon, perhaps.
Yeah. In fact, when I hired this last person to help me brand the Confrontationalist, I was like, I don't know how to do this. It's as if the last however many years and that mistake that I made didn't ever exist. Like it was as if I were, I had amnesia or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what are you doing? Of course, you know that people do this. You've spoken to coaches who do this. And I actually almost made a similar mistake again, because when you're in an industry, sometimes it's really hard to see outside of the bubble. So I spoke to a few coaches who actually did have a marketing, background, a couple of them. And I just had this, I had this gut feeling that it was really important to not have anyone who was going to be looking through the coaching lens at branding me. So I went with someone who on occasion does brand coaches, but she does a whole array of other things because I wanted someone with a different perspective. And that's what my gut told me to do. And I just had to go through the motions of all of the other people.
Sure. And then Danielle, I'm maybe final question related to the experience that you've shared here. What are some of the lessons now that you apply either to being a coach or even before that in terms of being selected? If someone is looking at you or perhaps others to help them, are the lessons that you then try to apply to help them make sure that there's a good fit with you, for example?
Well, I'm a huge advocate of working on trusting yourself, because I think that your intuition is never wrong, because it's a sense. It's like saying your sense of smell is wrong. It's never wrong. And I think it's really important to feel that this person can help you, and again, that's checking in with yourself. And I think that that's important in every decision you ever make. And the fact of the matter, there are people that I've spoken to that I believe I'm not a good fit for, and they're not a good fit for me. So, and I let them know that there are probably other people out there because my style may not work or whatever it is. So I think that when it comes to finding a coach, it needs to be someone who that person needs to resonate with you and help you find the clarity that you need, because that's what coaching is all about, is getting clarity so that you can get unstuck and move forward.
So earlier you talked about, I think this is a really important point and something I see a lot in different workplaces where people are scared to speak up.
Right.
They're, like you said, they're afraid of looking stupid. They're afraid of getting in trouble with the boss. And I've seen some things recently, posted online where, let's say it's ground rules posted for a meeting or some sort of environment. And there's this point I think is well intended, but it's sort of, I think, pointing the finger at people. It says like, don't be afraid to speak up. And I kind of react a little bit like, well, yes, we could all, maybe it would be ideal if we were all more assertive, if we all used our voice.
Yeah.
But to me, it almost feels like there's a little bit of blaming of like, shame on you for not speaking up. What's your thought in terms of a workplace dynamic of making it safe as it was in your family to speak up?
Well, I think that's a really good question, because what that statement means, that the people don't speak up, right? That's what that statement says.
It's a reaction to that. Yeah.
But what the person who wrote that statement doesn't realize is that either that person or the organization has told that the employees that it isn't safe to do that, right? So, for example, if I were to speak up, obviously I'm not the person they're talking to. That wouldn't be me. But the thing is that there is a fear-based culture in corporate America, and there's a lot of control that they want to have. I mean, there's a lot of instances right now when there's a lot of change that's happening right now in corporations because people want to work from home. And so it's almost like everything's been flipped, where the employer isn't as much control as the employee right now. So, but when it comes to speaking up, I think that people don't even know what they want to say, that because what happens when you're scared of speaking up and you've been taught that it isn't safe. And you weren't taught that it isn't safe in that corporation. You were taught at a very early age. What happens is your nervous system starts to react. Like people with public speaking, when they get their palms are sweaty, or I don't know, like some people I've worked with are like, I don't even know what I'm saying when I'm up there. And so they check out because they're terrified. And so if your nervous system is on overdrive at that point, and you're in survival mode, because that's what that means, because it's that dangerous to you on an unconscious level, speaking up isn't even an option. It's just not there. You can't get out of your own way. And that's one of the reasons I do this, because think about it. Like if you're terrified just to raise your hand and ask a question, how taxing is that on your body? Like that, you need a nap after that. So right. it's really my job to help people understand what happened, and it's not rational. None of this is rational. And, what is the fear ultimately? And And what does that look like in terms of something that may have happened in your past? But when there's a sign that says, don't be afraid to speak up, it's basically saying, we know you're scared to speak up, but don't be. They might as well write that.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing, or one other question, or, I was thinking about how to be more direct, especially when we're facing an uphill battle in a power differential or dynamic. So I'm curious to hear your reaction to this, if you think this was good advice, or if you would, how you would address this. So I've had the chance to sit in on some training in hospitals. It's meant to help improve patient safety and encouraging people who are lower in the power dynamic in, let's say, an operating room, helping them be more assertive, or to speak up, or to confront a surgeon about a risk. And I remember, like, they didn't just say, you should speak up. Like, they sort of taught a bit of a formula to say, let's say, role play, like if you're the surgeon here, I would say, Dr. Gibson. So first off, I'm getting your attention and addressing you respectfully. Then the second thing is to say, I have a concern, which is an assertive statement that probably nobody should react to say, no, you don't have a concern. Right, Dr. Gibson, I have a concern. We don't have enough units of blood on hand for this patient to start the procedure. I recommend that we wait until we have enough. Now, the flip side of that training is trying to encourage the physicians to not fly off the handle when somebody does speak up. I'm curious your reaction to that approach, or that type of scenario.
So from what I understand, surgeons are like, they think they're God, first of all, right? So there's that element of being perfect. But what I would want to do is have a conversation before you're in the operating room and say, how do you feel, Dr. Surgeon, about your assistant or this new person bringing up concerns? How do you want that relayed to you so that it works for you and doesn't interfere with your focus? So I would do it before.
Yeah. And it seems like there's both sides here, and to ask it a different way, thinking of, being a confrontationalist and coaching people through confrontation. Do you coach people to be a better receiver of a confrontational statement?
Yes. So here's the deal. In order to be good at confrontation, my definition, you have to be present in your body in the room, which means you're not in your head where all your fear is. So if I say to you, this was something that let's just say I have an idea, or I need you to do something that you haven't done, and I'm trying to manage up, right? And so you're my boss. And so one of the things that is a really great way to approach things, is to say, would you mind if I made an observation, right? So you're basically asking, can I give you an observation about something? And this is what you want to talk about. So no one ever says no, right? So if you're able to do that, and then the person says something back to you, in order for you to get done what you need to do, you have to be able to hear your boss. So most likely, if you're able to get the, may I make an observation out of your mouth, then you're already less scared, right? It's like an icebreaker. You're approaching this person in a softer way. I do this with the coaching. Do you mind if I make an observation? It's a way to give your opinion without saying it's your opinion. And then when someone says something back, let's say you're in a really bad mood and I haven't said anything to you, and you kind of like bark at me, right? And that's kind of something. And so what you're doing is you're taking your crap out on me. And one of the things that you could do is go, I'm wondering, this isn't how you usually are. Did something happen this morning? Right? So you're addressing, you have to know that that's not their usual style, or you have to know that people who treat you poorly are usually very unhappy. So if you appeal to the human side of them, you have to, though, be there. You have to be present, and you have to trust yourself. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like there are approaches, words to use, way of what I hear you talking about is prefacing things to give feedback in a way that's less threatening.
Absolutely. Like there's a storytelling element to it. I mean, it's really, one of the things that people often say is, I have something I need to talk to someone about, and I don't know how to start that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say this. There's something I've been wanting to talk about. I'm not sure how to start. If you could just let me fumble my way to the point, I would appreciate this. I will get there. So what are you doing when you do that? You're disarming this other person. You're asking them for help. Asking someone for help is always a good idea because, I mean, and nobody is good at asking for help either, but that's a whole other thing. But if you say to that person, there's this thing I've been trying and I can't figure it out, you're allowing that person's going to allow you, and you're going to allow you to figure it out. So it's about the setup.
Yeah. And, the way you're describing this, it changes that perception or that definition. Nothing, your coaching and your advice, of course, isn't, be aggressive, catch them off guard, blah, blah, blah. Like it's not this aggressiveness that's part of that negative connotation that often comes with the word confrontation.
It's not. And that's my hope, to try and change the definition, because I mean, listen, I am direct. Like I cut through everything. So if you're talking to me, chances are if you talk to me for a few minutes, you kind of get what my style is. So if you then say something to me and I'm like, this person is talking in circles, and I say to you, I'm really not understanding your point. Mm-hmm. By the time, like that might hurt you a little bit, but what am I supposed to say instead?
Sure.
What are you getting at, or whatever it is? I don't know how else to say it. I want to know what you're saying, what the reason is, so that I can just address it. And so, one of the things that you need to also be, that one of the results of this is authenticity. So people trust authentic people. So even if you're like positive, sometimes perceived as positive or perceived as saying something negative, regardless, there is the trust that you are a full-bodied individual, and that when you say something that is positive, that you mean it. And when you say something that isn't as positive, it's okay. Authenticity is really a key part of this also.
Yeah. Well, our guest again has been Danielle Gibson. Her website is theconfrontationalist.com. It says on your website under services, and it says there's an interesting phrase there: rent you for a day.
Yeah.
Can an individual do that? Does an organization do that? Both?
Well, generally speaking, it's a boss, if you will, right? Because it's really about having me come in and watching the dynamics of the person in charge throughout the day. So if the CEO or an upper management, SVP or whatever, and they have a slew of meetings, or I'm sitting in the office and I'm watching how people interact, I'm not just watching the person who's in charge. I'm watching the dynamic, and I'm also feeling the culture of the department as well. So I only get my client's side of the story when I work with them. But if I'm sitting in a room and I can feel the energy of the room, and I could see people not speaking up, or if I'm on a Zoom call with somebody, with the team, I can understand what a lot of the problems are really quickly.
That sounds a lot more effective than, let's say, if somebody were to just ask you, Danielle, come in and do some training about confrontation. No, you want to observe and sort of diagnose what's happening.
Right. But with training, though, I can get similar information, because those same people that won't raise their hand in that meeting with their boss, they're not going to raise their hand with me either. So I can then go, so I noticed that some of you aren't really participating. Why don't we talk about that? There must be things you want to say. And so there's this really great adage: how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're not speaking up at work, you're not speaking up at home, you're not speaking up with your friends, you're not speaking up with your spouse, like it's everywhere. So when someone hires me for one specific area, and it's very often work, miraculously their marriage gets better. It's just all of a sudden there's greater transparency.
And I'm assuming people hire you because they think there's some sort of problem. Hopefully they do so before things become too dysfunctional or too toxic so that it seems unsolvable.
Well, that would be ideal, wouldn't it? But by the time, the reason I get hired is because there's a feeling of stuckness that they can finally feel. So there's never a time when something can't be solved, ever, like in my mind. And so, if somebody, very often the person who comes to me understands that there's a problem. And then I find out how that problem manifests in different areas, and also what are some of the other ones. Because very often the thing that we think is the problem is not necessarily the problem.
For any of us who are consultants, that's very much often the case. But that opportunity to come in and observe and listen and try to help them frame or reframe the problem in a way that's going to be most helpful, that's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, reframing is. I was on the phone with someone the other day who had just made partner, and that person was terrified about it and had this idea of what that person was going to have to do. And I said, well, why can't it be something like this? And she's like, oh my God, that would be amazing. And I said, well, then that's what you should do because you like that. Yeah. So one of the things, I'm sure you find this, but one of the things people often do is they think of something and immediately discount it as it's not doable for no reason at all, other than it's their idea. We can't do this. And sometimes you literally can't do something, but if it makes sense, you figure it out.
Impossible? Does it violate laws of physics, or is it just sort of a self-defeating, self-fulfilling prophecy there?
Yeah. I mean, it's really, the same thing goes for me when I've worked on myself, and I have been my second full-time job for many, many decades now. Sometimes I'm looking at something going, I can't do this thing that's right in front of me, when I don't realize that it isn't that's the symptom of something else. But when you're stuck and you're looking at something and the I can't, or if only, or all this kind of stuff, you can't see it, which is why I hire coaches also.
Yeah. Right. Well, Danielle, thank you for sharing your experiences on both sides of that equation of hiring someone to work with you and being hired and working with people around communication and confrontation and making things better. So I appreciate you joining us today. Our guest again has been Danielle Gibson. The website is theconfrontationalist.com. And Danielle, you've got, if people are curious about renting you for a day or more, or they can schedule a call with you and see if that's
absolutely a good fit. On my website, there's I believe it's a contact me. And my email is hello@theconfrontationalist. There's also a form on my website. You can also go to @the_confrontationalist on Instagram and DM me there. There are multiple ways to get to me.
And that goes to show confrontation. The email address is hello@theconfrontationalist.com, not what's the matter with you @theconfrontationalist.
Right. Well, that would be a little long also, but no, it's really, like I said, I think it's unfortunate that the things that really bottle us up inside are simply things that we want to express. I think of this as being it is self-expression from an energetic. Think about all that crap that stays in your body when you don't say something. So I know that's not what you were talking about, but I think it's really, I feel pretty strongly about this.
Well, thank you for sharing those strongly held beliefs and views. And it's very helpful, very interesting today. So Danielle, thanks again.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks again to Danielle Gibson for being our guest today. To learn more about her, again, look for links in the show notes, or you can go to the website at markraven.com/mistake150. As always, I want to thank you for listening. I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your own mistakes, how you can learn from them or turn them into a positive. I've had listeners tell me they started being more open and honest about mistakes in their work. And they're trying to create a workplace culture where it's safe to speak up about problems, because that leads to more improvement and better business results. If you have feedback or a story to share, you can email me, myfavoritemistakepodcast@gmail.com. And again, our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com.